Good morning, everybody. It's so good to be together this morning. If we haven't met, my name's Austin Harris. I get the privilege of being on the student ministry staff here at Southside, and I get the honor to be the Kathleen campus student pastor. And I'm just so thankful that we could all gather here this morning. I want to introduce you to somebody really quickly. This is a picture of me and my wife. This is Shelly. We just hit the 9-month mark of marriage. Okay. I thought you guys would clap for that. Some of y'all know that first year. You're learning each other. You're trying to figure things out. And but keep us in your prayers, seriously. But we were coming home yesterday, Friday. We decided to take an impromptu trip to Savannah, and we were driving home, and she said, "Man, you're preaching Next Gen Sunday." And I said, "I am." And she said, "That's crazy because you're like 50. And I'm 29, guys. So I didn't know whether to be offended or to laugh or what, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity this morning. Like I said, we took a trip to Savannah, and we got to go down to downtown Savannah, walk around. We went shopping a little bit yesterday, and it was just a great day. We were observing the holiday, right? Like observing the 4th, and while we were kind of doing the shopping, I was kind of scanning my phone to see if Joey Chestnut was going to win the hot dog world eating championship again, which he did. But it was a great day. And it was one of those days where as we were driving back, I just kind of thought to myself, man, life is good. And then I kind of started thinking about, there was a time where some of these shirts were really, really popular. Maybe you know about them, the Life is Good shirts. Anybody remember the Life is Good shirts? Some of you probably had one on yesterday, okay, at the lake, right? Don't lie, be honest about it. But I love the Life is Good shirts, and you got like the one with the pontoon boat on it, and maybe, hey, that's the good life for you, right? Like maybe yesterday you were at the lake pulling your kids, your grandkids on the tube, and they were having a good time. Maybe for you, when life is good, it means you're on the dock, right, with a fishing pole, and your dog is just chilling there having a good time with you. Maybe it's being able to have the freedom, like the guy grabbing the surfboard, like, hey, I can go do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, just like that guy just grabs his surfboard and goes and does what he wants to do. I don't know where you are, but all of us have a picture in our minds of what the good life is. But what if I told you this morning that we weren't just called to live a good life, we've been called to live a godly life? And today is Next Gen Sunday. It's already been such an amazing morning. And this isn't just a day where children and students sing, serve, or stand on this stage. The whole heartbeat behind Next Gen Sunday here at Southside is simple. We believe that children, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and even young adults aren't just the future of the church. They're a vital part of the church right now. And as a church, because we understand that, because we believe that we got to be intentional about investing in the next generation. Because how many know a godly life doesn't just happen by accident? It happens when parents, grandparents, leaders, church family come alongside one another, lock arms, and say, hey, together, collectively, we are going to point the next generation to Jesus. And so today, as we celebrate what God is doing in the next generation, my hope this morning is that we all would be challenged to not just strive to live a life that is good by the world standards, but that we would be a group of people collectively who say, we want to live a godly life by God's standards. And I think if I took a poll, many, if not all of us, would say, hey, we absolutely want to live a godly life. But I think many of us would also, if we could be honest, would say that sometimes our schedules, our responsibilities, the chaos of paying bills, getting through another week, sometimes those things can take up the spot of highest priority. And somewhere in the midst of all the chaos, in the midst of the crazy schedules, many of us sometimes settle for living a good life instead of striving to live a godly one. And that's exactly why Peter writes what he does in 1 Peter chapter 2. So if you have a Bible, you can go ahead and start turning there. He's writing to a group of believers that are living in a culture that doesn't share the values of the church. They're facing pressure to blend in. There's temptation for these believers to just compromise and go with the flow. And so Peter's going to write to them, and his message is very clear. If we are a Christian, if we've been saved, if we've surrendered our life to the Lordship of Jesus, we must leave sin behind. We should have a desire to grow spiritually. And we should live out our new identity as God's chosen people. And Peter's saying that, hey, if we're going to be a godly person in an ungodly world, these are just a few things that we got to be intentional about. And here's where this is important, because a lot of people will take the new identity, but leave the other two. They will say, yes, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I love God. But I know so many people that if I were to ask them, they would say, yes, I'm a Christian, but the sin hasn't been left behind, and there is no desire to grow spiritually. And here's something, honestly, that God has been kind of getting my attention with for a while now. And it's simply this, because I've been wondering, hey, if I claim to be a Christian, if I claim to have a relationship with God, and yet my life looks no different, why would anybody have any interest in Christianity? Why would they care if I say I'm a believer, and yet I walk out these doors, I go into the week, and my life looks no different? And so Peter writes to these people saying, hey, this is a challenge, that you guys, your lives should look different. And then he's going to kind of give us some practical ways as to how to do that. So let's look at 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 11. It says, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Now, when I read this, I can't help but think, I see those words, foreigner in exile, and I can't help but think about when I knew I was going to propose to my wife. I knew she was the one, and for those of you that don't know, my wife is from Sacramento, California. So she's from, the other side of the continent. And so we had some discussions, and we had kind of said, hey, like, do you see marriage down the line? And we both were like, yeah, of course, yeah. Why wouldn't you? And so I knew that I was going to propose in California because we had talked, and we had said, hey, if we decide to get married here, I asked her, do you think like your family would be able to come? And she said, yeah, I think most of my family would be able to come, but I think there's going to be some family members that aren't going to be able to make the trip. And so because of that, because I knew that, I decided, okay, I want to propose in California so that all of her family, or as much of her family, can be there to celebrate this monumental moment with us. And so we go to the airport, and I hadn't been on a plane at this point in over 10 years. And so I was already nervous. And then we go through TSA, and of course my bag gets stopped with the ring in it. And so the guy's like, hey, is there anything in this bag that you need to tell me about? And Shelly's standing right there. And so I'm like, hey, Shelly, can you go get me like a pack of Skittles or something like for the plane? I got to get her out of the way so I could tell this guy. And I tell him, say, hey, man, I got a ring in there. I don't need her to see that. That's really the only thing in there that I care about. And that's really the major thing that you need to know about. And so he clears it. We get on the plane, and, seatbelts are buckled, and they're going through the instructions that nobody really listens to anyway. And so we're sitting there, and Shelly said, I need you to know something. And she said, I think you're going to be kind of shocked, but she said, I just want to tell you that Cali is different. And I was kind of like, whatever, it's the United States of America. How different could it really be? And she's like, no, I'm telling you that California is different. And she was absolutely right, guys. We got off the plane, and I remember being like, are we still in America? Did we get on the right plane? Did something go wrong? And I can remember getting to California, and it was a great time. It really was. It was just very different. And but the point I want to make with that was that even though Sacramento is not my home, there was a reason for why I was there. There was a purpose for me getting on that plane. And it was to propose to Shelly. And so what Peter is saying in this verse is as foreigners and exiles, I don't know if you know this, but once we surrender our lives to Jesus, this earth no longer becomes our home. We get a place at the table with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's our home. We have a place in heaven that has been secured through the cross, but that doesn't mean that our job on here is done once that happens. If that was the case, if the whole goal of Christianity was just to get saved, once that happened, we'd be beamed up. We wouldn't be here. But God says, no. This place is no longer your home, but you got a purpose. And that purpose is to reflect me. Show people who I am. Tell them about the gospel. Tell them about the cross. Tell them about a love that many have never even heard about. And so he's saying, hey, even though we're foreigners and exiles, we still have a purpose here. And he's saying that, hey, that purpose is to show people Jesus. But he's also saying that, hey, a big way to do that is to what? Abstain or avoid from sinful desires that we all have. And many times that's easier said than done, isn't it? Because even though we've been saved, that doesn't necessarily mean that the battle is over. We can love Jesus and still struggle with temptation. We can be forgiven and still fight our old desires. You and I can belong to God and still feel that pull of sin. And here's the deal. The enemy knows he's lost. He knows that he's got nothing left. He can't do anything. He knows he can't steal your salvation. So what does he do? He will try everything in his power to steal our joy, weaken our witness, distract us from the purpose that God has placed on our lives. The Bible says this enemy is like a lion. He's ready to kill, steal, kill, and destroy. He wants after us because he knows his time is limited. And so Peter isn't saying, hey, watch out because you could lose your salvation. What he's saying here is, hey, watch out because you are now in a battle. Every day there's a battle between who you used to be and who God is calling you to become. There's a battle between the desires of the flesh and the Spirit of God living within you. There's a battle between living like the world and living like the people of God. And so Peter here is saying, hey, don't just stand there and leave the door wide open and let the enemy do what he wants to do. He's calling us to engage in the battle. He's saying, make the choice as people who are free from the authority of sin to live life in a way that reflects the new identity that we have. And then notice how Peter continues, verse 12, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. So now, even though we are foreigners, even though this world isn't our home, even though we now belong to the family of God, here's what he's saying. That doesn't necessarily mean we're just in a holy bubble. We still live among people who do not belong to the family of God. And you and I still interact with people every single day who don't share the same faith. We sit in meetings where our values are not the norm. We coach on teams with parents who have very different priorities than their kids. We go to schools with people who have never heard the gospel. We even have family members that may not even have ever heard the gospel. And Peter is saying, hey, yes, we are different, but that doesn't mean that we are removed from the world. Peter didn't tell us to escape the world. He actually tells us to live a godly life in it. And our everyday actions are a part of our testimony. Whether we realize it or not, and whether we like it or not, it matters. Because people are watching. And I don't know if you've ever felt this way. It feels like people have a magnifying glass on Christians, doesn't it? They are watching, waiting, just hoping for us to have a moment where we slip up so they can put us on blast, put us on social media and say, man, I don't want nothing to do with that. They messed up. How could they claim to do this and then do this? People are watching us, waiting for us to slip up. And so Peter's like, man, you shouldn't be surprised when people come at you that way. You shouldn't be surprised when they accuse you or come at you with accusation. But he does say our defense should be different. Our defense shouldn't be to fight back with nasty words or to repost something on social media or react in the same way as the world. Peter's saying our response should be different. Our choices, our lives, our decisions all have the potential and the power to bring someone else to God. And people often decide what they think about God by watching the people who claim to follow him. Not too long ago, I went into a local pizza place. I went into My Father's Place Pizza. And My Father's Place Pizza was the very first job that I had. I was a delivery driver. I think that my car still smells like pizza. I don't know if that smell will ever get out, no matter how many air fresheners I try to put in there. But I was delivery driver. So I walked in, and the guy that gave me the job as a delivery driver, his son was my best friend in high school and early on in college. And I walk in and I see the family there, and they were kind of in the middle of the restaurant, so I couldn't, kind of like not look at them, And so I make eye contact with them. I go over there, I'm talking to them. And it's important for you to understand that during this season of my life, I made a lot of very poor choices. And a lot of it was happening at his house. And so I did stuff that I shouldn't have. I made poor choices. And I was one of those people where, hey, if you would have asked me, I would have told you, hey, yeah, I was a Christian, but my life looked nothing like it. And so I walk in and I'm talking to them and I'm asking them how life is. And they're talking to me. And the guy that was a friend of mine, he said, we still talk about some of the things you used to do. And that hurt. And I told him, I was like, man, that's not me anymore. That was 6-7 years ago. I know they said they were going to kill it. They're not going to steal my thunder this morning. I might be around 50, hypothetically, but that's how we are. We're behind the curve. And I was just like, man, like I walked out of that restaurant and I was like, man, like I'm so different now. A lot of things have changed. A lot of priorities in my life have changed. A lot of things I pursue are different. And yet that's what they remembered me by. And it just hurt. And so people are watching. And the goal is that we should be striving to live a godly life so that others might see and believe in God. And then Peter continues in verse 13. He says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. So now Peter's going to talk about another way that we can live a godly life. And here it is. It's by submitting ourselves to those that are in authority. And here's the deal. This applies to everybody in the room right now. You got a boss maybe that's in that position of authority and you don't think they should be. Maybe you got a supervisor who micromanages everything and they never seem to trust you. Maybe there's a government leader or a policy that frustrates you every time you hear about it. Maybe it's your parent and you think their rules are old, outdated, and unfair. Wherever you are and whoever it may be, Peter is making it clear that one of the best ways to reflect Christ is by submitting to those that are in a position of authority. And here's the deal, and this is going to sting a little bit. If we're honest, most of us don't mind authority as long as the authority agrees with us. But the moment we disagree, the moment we don't like that decision, the moment we get inconvenienced, that's when submission gets difficult. And remember, we got to remember who Peter is writing to in these moments. He's not writing from a comfortable place. He's writing to a group of believers under the authority of the Roman Empire. They didn't have a godly government. They didn't have leaders who shared Christian values. In fact, they were a government that persecuted Christians. And yet Peter says, submit yourselves. Because what sets us apart is choosing submission when things feel unfair, tough, frustrating. And I want to make something clear. Peter is not telling this group of Christians to submit to the authorities because those leaders are necessarily good. He's telling them to submit to the authorities because God is good. And our submission is not about the authority over us. It's about reflecting the God who is above all. So even though you might go to work and you don't like your boss and you have that person that micromanages everything you do, or that neighbor that's always, doing stuff. I mean, whatever it may be, here is the deal. It's not about just submitting because they're good. It's about submitting because of who God is. And our goal is to reflect God. God is over all. He's above all. He's still on the throne. He's still sovereign. He still has a plan. He still has a purpose. So even though we go out of here and go into our places of business or whatever it may be, you go to school in about a month, even though we go into those places and you may not like that teacher, you may not like your boss, Peter's saying, hey, submit yourselves. Why? Because it's a way to reflect Christ, and Christ is over all. And then Peter isn't done. He's going to continue. For it is God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. I was thinking, I read this verse and I was like, man, I don't know why, but my grandmother came to my mind. My grandmother, she passed away 5 months ago, February 3rd. And we were at the funeral home, and we were kind of in the receiving line. And so people were coming through, talking to us. And what was crazy, and really what kind of blew my mind, is I didn't have to convince anybody that came through that line that she lived a godly life. In fact, everybody that came through that line affirmed to me that she did live a godly life. And I'll just tell you a little bit about their story. My grandfather was a pastor for many years, and they were at this church, and they built the church up to about 600 to 800 people. And then one day, the church, some people in the church decided, hey, we don't want you here anymore. They said, we don't want you here anymore. So they sent them off, and this is how awful it was. The day that my mom, my uncle, and my aunt, and my grandparents left in the U-Haul, the people from the church, they lined the streets, and they turned their back, and they clapped as they left. Now, I'm going to be honest. If that had been me, and I had that U-Haul, some people would have been clipped. I'm just telling you. I'm just being honest. If I was in that position. But they didn't. And they went on and they moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and they lived their life. And we're standing again in the receiving line, and a lady from that church came in. And I'm not sure what my mom was thinking. I'm not sure what my aunt and uncles were thinking. But that lady came past me and Shelly, and she told us, she said, your grandmother lived a godly life. And I didn't have to convince her, because everybody there knew, and they saw it in her life. That's why the loudest message that you and I will ever preach is not, it's important, but it's not just in the words that we say. It's not just in the way we conduct ourselves. The loudest message that you and I will ever preach is in the life that you and I live. And I don't know about you. I'm not satisfied. I know I'm only 29. I'm not satisfied right now with just a good life. I want to get to the end of my life and have people, if I'm blessed to have kids of my own and grandkids, I want people to go through the line and say, he lived a godly life, not just a good life. And so Peter says, hey, it's by doing those things, it's by living a godly life that you will silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. So when people misunderstand us or criticize us or make assumptions about our faith, our assumption doesn't have to be to argue louder. Instead, Peter's saying, hey, let your life do the talking. Let your life do the talking. And here's the deal. People may not listen to your beliefs, but they will notice how you and I treat people. They'll notice how we handle adversity. They'll notice how we live for God in the good times and in the bad times. When people talk good about us or talk behind our back, God sees all that, and so does the world. And so for those of us in the room this morning, our greatest witness is in the life that we live. And then Peter's going to go on, and he's going to talk about how the motivation behind the action matters just as much as the actions themselves. And so Peter wants this group of people to understand, he wants us to understand this morning that we don't just try to live a godly life out of obligation. We live a godly life because we've been set free. And that's why he continues in verse 16, live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Live as free people. Because I don't know if you know this, Jesus has set us free. He set us free from sin, from shame, from trying to be good enough. He's saying live in that freedom. But hear this, just because we are free does not mean we have permission to do whatever we want. And how many times do we know people or see people, and we got people that are, I'm a Christian, I got my get out of hell free card. And they go right back to that pattern of sin. They go right back into that thing. That pattern keeps repeating itself. And they just think, man, I can do this and then come right back to God and everything will be good. That's not what Peter's saying. And the world says that freedom is doing whatever feels right. Do whatever you want. Do what just makes you feel good. And Peter's saying, no, it's actually the opposite. True freedom is found in living a life with Jesus at the center of everything. And here's the deal. If Jesus really is at the center, it won't just change what we say, what we do, where we go. It'll also change how we treat people. It'll change the way, not only how we treat them, but how we see them, the way we respond to those put in authority. And ultimately, it'll change the way we honor God. And that's exactly where Peter goes next in verse 17. He says, show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and honor the emperor. And Peter's message is simple. Our credibility is often revealed in the consistency of our conduct. Guys, if we walk out of these doors at the end of Next Gen Sunday, and we go into our jobs, we go onto the ball field to coach those teams, and we say we're a Christian, but then our life doesn't look like that, what credibility do we have? Why would anybody who's not a Christian have any interest in hearing about the good news in the gospel of Jesus Christ if I claim to be a Christian and my life looks the same as everybody else? So our credibility is revealed in the consistency of our conduct. How do we conduct ourselves consistently? And that's summarized in verse 17. Honor everyone. Love the church. Fear God. Not be afraid of God, but actually have a healthy fear of God. And honor those in authority. And Peter would then go on in the next couple of verses to actually encourage us yet again. He'd say, hey, submit yourselves to those in authority over us. He would encourage us to make the choice to humble ourselves to the level of a slave and a servant. And while the world teaches us to fight back, demand our rights, resist unfairness at all costs, Peter's saying that a life lived for Christ actually looks very different. And the encouragement in this passage is that God sees every act of faithful endurance and none of it is wasted. When we keep our eyes on Him, when we choose to speak righteousness and encouragement over retaliation and gossip, when we speak encouragement to people at the ball fields and things like that, all of those things, we are participating in a testimony that speaks much louder than words. We're living in a way to where God's presence is felt and His character will be seen. So maybe you're here and you're like, man, why would I do that? That's good stuff. That's encouraging. Why would I do that? Why would I submit to the authority of those around me? Why would I belittle myself? Why would I put myself at the level of a slave for the world? That's most likely what these people are wondering. Remember, they're not living in a Christian culture. So I bet they had some questions like, why would we do this? Why would we live a life this way? And Peter tells us why in verse 21. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in His steps. He committed no sin and no deceit was found in His mouth. When they hurled their insults at Him, He did not retaliate. When He suffered, He made no threats. Instead, He entrusted Himself to Him who judges justly. He Himself bore our sins in His body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By His wounds you have been healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and the overseer of your souls. See, we're called to do this because Jesus suffered, and He suffered not because He deserved it, but because we did. Jesus lived a life without sin, without deceit, without retaliation. When He was up on a cross, it tells us that the people at the cross are throwing their insults at Him. And in that moment, He doesn't fire back. When He's in pain, He doesn't threaten. Instead, what does He do? He trusted God completely, even when it led Him to a cross. And that's where this morning, this becomes more than just an example we should follow. This is where the good news comes in. Because Jesus didn't just endure the suffering to inspire us. He bore our sins to save us. And because He did that, you and I can live a godly life. On that cross, he took everything we deserved, our sin, our guilt, our shame. He took all that upon himself so that you and I could have a new life. Not a good life, a better life, a new life. And what was a broken relationship was able to be restored. So here's where this all lands for us this morning. I believe there's really three types of people in here right now. And the first group is some of us need to come to Jesus for the first time. Maybe you're in here and you knew one of the kids that was going to be on the stage singing, and maybe you've grown up and you've been around church and you have heard about God, but you've never actually surrendered your life to him. And if that's you, I just want to say this as clearly as I can. This message is about living differently. It's about, enduring hardship. It's about following the example of Jesus. But hear me when I say this. That's not where it starts. It starts with surrender. And you can't live like Christ until you surrender your life to Christ. And so the good news in the gospel is that Jesus didn't come just to give you an example to follow. He came to give you a new life this morning. And he offers you forgiveness and a restored relationship with him. And here's the good news. You don't have to clean yourself up. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to get everything together. You simply got to call on him, trust him, and surrender to him. The second group is those of us that need to come back to Jesus. Maybe you're in here and you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and maybe you started and you've really been trying to live a godly life, but somewhere this year, somewhere in the midst of everything, you decided to settle for living a good life rather than striving to live a godly life. And if that's you, just hear me. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm just trying to give you a wake-up call this morning. Because following Jesus was never meant to be casual. And Peter makes it clear that you and I don't just receive a new title. We're given a new life. And so maybe today for you, the response is that you need to quit playing both sides. You need to quit being 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You need to let go of that sin or that thing that is holding you back from living a godly life. And you need to say, hey, today I am going all in. I'm not just going to be a halfway Christian. I'm not going to be a Christian just on Sundays. I'm not just going to be a Christian when it seems convenient for me. I am going to choose today to fully surrender and come back to Jesus. And then there's the third group in here, those who are walking with God. You're striving to live that godly life. And if this is you, I want to say, I understand it can be hard. You're trying to do the right thing at work and it seems like it costs you. You're trying to honor God in all your relationships and it seems like people don't understand. You're choosing integrity and it feels like maybe you're the only one. And if that's you, my encouragement for you this morning is this. Keep your eyes fixed on God. Fix your eyes on the one, as Peter says, who's going to judge justly one day. Keep your eyes fixed on the one who gave up everything, left heaven, left paradise to come to this world and die for you. And I want you to know that God sees you. He sees that quiet act of obedience. He sees every moment you choose integrity over lying and deception. He sees every time that you hold your tongue. Every time you did the right thing when it would have been easier to just not to. None of it has been wasted. And just like how Jesus entrusted himself to the one who judges justly, the good news for us this morning is we can too. So we don't have to get up or give up. We don't have to grow weary. We can keep going. This morning, I don't know where you are, but I do know this. Everybody in here is telling a story. You don't get to walk out of this building and say, no, I'm not gonna tell a story with my life. Everybody in here, when we go out, get in our cars, we will go into our jobs. We'll go into our schools. We'll go to the ball field, to the practices. We will go, and our lives are going to tell a story. The question this morning is, what story are you going to tell? And what are you going to pursue? Are you going to pursue a good life or a godly life? So I don't know where you are this morning, but the invitation for all of us is simple. Come to Jesus Follow his example and trust him with your life.
Thank you so much for watching our sermon today. Our mission statement here at Southside, it's simple. It's to love God, love people, love the world on the journey to life change. No matter where you are on your journey, we want to be a part of it. Whether that's through baptism, joining the church, or so much more, we want to help you take that next step. So go to Southside.Church online or download our Southside.Church app. Thanks so much again for tuning in today, and we hope to see you in person at Southside soon.